First off, thank you so much, Stephanie, for agreeing to do this. Before we begin, I'm just going to give a brief introduction about BCLA. So BCLA is a nonprofit organization run by graduate students, postdocs, and biotech professionals around LA. And our mission is to inspire, educate, and connect emerging scientists and entrepreneurs to grow and diversify biotech in Los Angeles. To do this, we host networking events, career fairs, symposia, panels, and summits each year all over the LA County with about 120 plus attendees at our events. Currently, we have over 5,000 subscribers to our monthly newsletter, and all of our events are free to students and postdocs. And now, without further ado, let's get started. To begin with, can you tell me a little bit about your career path and maybe what led you to the role that you're in today?
Well, I guess I have a very typical career path in the sense of an academic. Like many other people, I was fascinated with science and how nature works and everything, and started my studies. I studied in Austria to get my PhD. So I did my bachelor's, my master's, my PhD all in Austria. And then at that point, I had already switched fields once. So after my master's degree in ecology, I switched to plant physiology because I was like, oh, ecology is great and it's super interesting, but you can't really find a job. I was like, okay. Mm-hmm. So I was interested in getting into the lab part, and became an electron microscopist and really dug in there. And after my PhD, I was like, okay, what's the next step? Obviously, I thought, okay, postdoc, right? Now I'm gonna go further. Again, it was a switch in fields because I had done plant physiology for my PhD. Mm-hmm. Then with the techniques I had learned, I moved into the retina, so into ophthalmology, and worked at the Eye Institute at UCLA to do my postdoc. So from Austria to UCLA, I arrived there and I was like, oh, this is so exciting. I'm finally a PhD. I'm a scientist, right? And then I was like, oh, this is still exciting, but it feels like the same as it did when I still was doing my PhD. Mm-hmm. So I was a little disappointed, still excited, but as I got into my role and did my research at UCLA, I was like, there's something missing. I need to know more. I was like, I need to know what else we can do with our training, with all this time we're spending getting our PhD. That can't be everything. Just science is great, but there's other stuff, right? So I was interested in exploring the business side of science. And as I tried to engage in different programs, it was seeking out different opportunities around campus all over, I realized there are not enough opportunities for postdocs, at least in my opinion. I tried to get into internships. I was told no, they're only for grad students or whatever. And I realized I need to make my own opportunities and joined some group, but it quickly fell apart. But then from there on, I had met Katrina, who's a co-founder of BCLA. And then so we both were like, yeah, we want to know more. We need to do something. And so we just started BCLA from there on out, and we're like, let's find out what else there is, and we're not the only ones that are interested in exploring these opportunities. So let's create opportunities for us and for others to learn more about the biotech and life sciences industry that is really also an alternative career path, but doesn't have to be. I think it's always good to explore other avenues. So this is kind of how I got interested in outside of academia, which is long-winded, but to your question, what I do now, it's actually very interesting, and I think a field that I didn't even know about until recently, or let's say about a year and a half ago, is continued medical education. I find it very exciting and work for this company that has this whole vision of changing medical education as it is done today. It's usually education that's sponsored by companies, but we have an approach of having multi-sponsored programs from multiple companies to really give doctors education on the current treatments, what is new, what is exciting, what are the best treatments based on research and evidence for the patients. So we are trying to make a difference by really giving education to the doctors that is not just kind of from one company, sort of promotion for one of their products. They're always sponsored by multiple companies, and that gives us the ability to really create content without so much bias. And I'm excited about that. That's kind of why I was like, yeah, that's perfect. And through previous experiences, I think I was able to get that job.
Absolutely. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. So with that in mind, what does sort of a typical workday look like for you?
I guess no day is exactly the same. So this is what I like about this new position that I've been in now for about a year, is I work remotely. This company is, as I said, it's small, but it feels very much, it's got that startup vibe. You get to wear many hats. I'm the global project manager for especially focusing on Europe to develop our programs and execute them. And so what every day would look like, I don't know, I get up in the morning, work remotely, right? So I make my coffee, I check my emails, and then I look at what's on the agenda. And sometimes there are days where you already know certain tasks that you work on. It's very versatile, I would say.
What are some of the big projects that you're working on right now, or that you've finished up in the last few months?
Mm-hmm. So what have I been doing recently? So a whole lot of different things. What I'm doing in my position generally is like I'm working on annual education programs, and we're putting together um, grants for this reason. And in the grant, there are multiple tactics that we want to implement throughout the year. And they're very different, from live symposia to print supplements to podcasts. So we have different things we're doing. And I put together a schedule on when we want to do what things. And so I recently, for example, I've been working on some print supplements, and I've worked together with the medical writer, and I put together the outline, and then we'll work with the writer to put the content together. Then we work with the key opinion leaders, the KOLs, to make sure that content is actually all, correct and right, and is what they want to say, because they contribute to these supplements. And then I work with the publication team on the designs a little bit, and proofread everything. And so this is two of those sort of supplements I've been doing recently. Is fun. There are so many steps to it.
Yeah, sounds
But yeah, that's something I've been doing recently, I think. So that as an example of the things I'm doing from day to day.
So I guess you kind of touched upon it, but what do you enjoy the most about the work that you do? What are you currently really excited about?
You can already tell what I think is cool, that not every day is the same. And I think that is very important for me. I would call my job pretty multifaceted, and that's what I love about it. So and because it's a small company, I think if you work for a really big company, it might be different. You're more like in a niche position, but I get to help out with writing those educational grants, scheduling the tactics, designing the tactics, making the content for these different educational programs, working with the KOLs, also with writers. So there's so much that goes into it, and I think that's really exciting. And at the end of the day, you feel like you're trying to make a difference, because the more education the doctors have, the better the treatment for the patient's going to be. So I think that's where you can be like, good, I like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it sounds fascinating. Just the versatility in your job. But is there anything that you don't necessarily enjoy about your job, or what is the aspect of your job that you enjoy the least, or you were surprised about?
Yeah, I guess obviously nothing is perfect, but I wouldn't say this is something I really don't like. I just think that what I find harder in this job is you spend so much time in front of a screen, especially when there are days that
Absolutely.
are super busy, right? And you're working 10 hours in front of a screen. It's hard to sit so long. And then there are days where you just don't have the focus, and you have so much to do, and you're like struggling away, and you get some stuff done, but it's by far not as much as you need to do. It almost makes me think of these times when you write a paper and you're kind of stuck in the middle of writing and you sat all day in front of half a page, and those days. And they don't happen very often, but they do happen, and it's very frustrating because you're like, this still needs to get done. And yeah, so I think this is the stuff that is very different to what I've done before, but I would say that's my least favorite thing, but I think you can't avoid that. That's not really job specific. I think that could happen in any other role as well, where you do a lot of screen time.
Was it a difficult transition from obviously doing a lot of, bench work to just spending most of your time in front of the screen?
Yeah, I think, as I said, I think that's it, where when you work in the lab, you spend some time in front of the screen, and then the other time you run around, execute experiments and all that, go to the microscope, plan and schedule. I still have a lot of the planning and scheduling, which I do like. But yeah, I think that's the biggest transition for me, to be in front of the screen a lot. And I was at first in the role, I would say for the first 6 months, I was pretty hard on myself. I was like, I need to work so and so many hours and, get all this done. I didn't take enough breaks. And it led to a point where I was like unable to focus well. And I think that's something that's super important if you do a lot of work in front of a screen, to take breaks every like 1.5 or 2 hours. And it doesn't need to be a long break. 5 minutes is enough, or 10, but just to get, kind of the tension out, and then you can focus again. But I think that was a hard transition for me, or how should I say, that was a challenge, but I think I got it. Yeah.
Great. So what kind of skills do you think are the most important for someone who might be interested in a job similar to yours?
That's a really good question. I think for a role like this, you need flexibility, you need to be accountable, you need to be a really good communicator, you need to have attention to detail. And for me, I just feel like everything I've done in the past, leading up to this point, helped me to kind of understand like skill sets that I have. And I think everything I've done has prepared me in a way for a role like this that's so versatile, as we discussed. Doing a PhD teaches you how to learn stuff really quickly, new content, because I'm still learning as I'm creating content for the doctors. Like for these programs, I don't know everything. Often I have to read papers and make sure I understand everything we're putting in our programs. Obviously working with the doctors who are double checking everything, but then the other thing is attention to detail, or knowing how to create programs or tailor programs, everything that comes together. But I think these things I mentioned on flexibility, attention to detail, good communication skills, to work in a team and with different people, is super important.
Absolutely. Yeah. What would you say are some of the biggest challenges that you face on kind of a day-to-day basis?
Not every day is a challenge. So there are days that are not so busy, which is nice. And then there are times that get very busy. And right now, in the current COVID-19 situation, we don't travel, but usually for my job, there's a lot of travel involved, because I'm going to the big conferences where we do live events, and the preparation for those is very time consuming, because there's a lot of back and forth with the doctors, preparing their presentations, putting together an outline first, obviously, and all this stuff. So that, I think, are the times where it's more challenging, but it's super busy. So then you just have to work as much as you do to make sure everything gets done in time. I think that's the challenging thing. You might wake up and not know that today you have to work 10 hours or more, but then there are other days where you can take it easier after you get this important stuff out the door. And I think that's challenging sometimes.
Yeah. That makes sense. What about the rewarding aspects of your job?
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the biggest rewards?
I think we already talked about it a little bit. What is rewarding for me about this position is that I feel like I can make a difference. And I think that's also what drew me to science and then further to like research. You want to do something that changes the world a little bit, makes it a little bit better, right? I feel like with this job, I also get the opportunity to do this because, as I said before, it feels good to make sure that doctors have the most up-to-date education and knowledge on best treatments, because that will help the patients get the best treatment. And I think that's cool. I think that's really rewarding for me. And these, as I just said, the big life events that we do at the conferences, they're super stressful to prepare. But then I would say, you go through the program, you make sure everything works, and it's kind of like our BCLA events where you're so stressed at the beginning. You're like, is everything there? Do we have everything in place? And then as you go through the program and it ends and everybody is like, the room's fully packed and everybody's super happy, you're like, yeah, that was good. So I think that's yeah, super rewarding. And I already did that with BCLA, so I kind of like, I'm excited I still get to do stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything that you wish you'd known before starting this role?
Actually, I wouldn't say anything in particular, because the throughout what I've done in the past, it's like I've changed from different scientific fields, and then with this, it was also a big step outside of academia. Uh, And I think what is important to know is that I think every position, whether it's in the current industry you're working in or if it's a complete career change, I think it's a huge adjustment at first. I would say at least the first half year to a year, you're learning everything from figuring out your boss and your colleagues, or how to best work together, how to communicate, and also just what are all the roles. Like, everything's new, and even if you know how to do these things, I think there's a learning curve that's really steep at first. And I think that is something I think you should just know when you go into a new position. But that yeah, I think that's totally normal, but
Okay.
nothing particular where I'm like, I needed to know this. I think that is something to be expected, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful advice, probably for everyone out there, getting started or looking to get started in a job. So, with all this in mind, where do you sort of see yourself in 5 to 10 years, in terms of
Mhm.
your career?
That's also a good question. So for me, I'm really happy where I'm at right now, and I'm still learning. And I think as long as I'm learning, I'm very excited in a role. I also feel like I'm incredibly lucky that I got to join this company, because their culture is unique, and it reminds me a lot of the work I've done with BCLA, where it's just a team, everybody works together, and even though there's not a lot of people, everybody always helps out, and I'd love to see the company grow. Especially, we have big aspirations. We want our kind of education model to not only be practiced in ophthalmology, because we think that all sorts of different therapeutic areas could benefit from a more balanced education approach. So yeah, the company has big aspirations. I'd love to be a part of that growth. So we'll see.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's great to hear. It's great that you're, flourishing in your new role, and that your skills from BCLA have sort of helped you in your career. So, with that being said, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview. I think it was very helpful, very beneficial for everyone out there. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me.